Okay, we have 4:15. Is that Marsha?
No.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. And we will have a Del Rey. We'll take a silent roll call. Do we have any boards or ex facto members' comments?
I will say that our walk was fantastic. When I was talking the other night, tons of people. I thought Oktoberfest was going to affect the attendance at Art Walk, and I think it might have boosted the attendance at Art Walk. And we were lucky, great weather, and a lot of people, lots of eyes on downtown businesses. It's also good bonus.
That's great. Any other board member comments? Okay, now hearing that, has everyone had a chance to have to review the agenda for tonight's meeting? Any changes or corrections? Can I get a motion to approve that?
Second.
All in favor? Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the August 28th board meeting? Do we have any changes or corrections? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, have a second? All in favor? Okay, the exciting part of our meeting is the public invited to be heard. No, that's the most exciting. You don't say anything. Okay, and we have a presentation. The City of Longmont ballot issue update.
Good afternoon.
All right.
Slide over here. My name is Jim Angstadt. I am the Director of Engineering Services for the City of Longmont, Public Works and Natural Resources Department. With me is Ben Wagner, who is with
Recreation.
Recreation.
I'm the Recreation Area Supervisor for Recreation Utah.
So today we are here to provide you some information on the City of Longmont 2019 ballot issues. The city is looking at for the November 5th, 2019 election. Real quick, this disclaimer. This is intended to provide a factual summary of the ballot issues. It is not intended to sway your vote, to urge you one way or the other. We will be challenged to answer some of your questions so that we do not what we call taint the vote. We don't want to provide you, any direction as to which way to vote. So bear that in mind when you ask us some really challenging questions. Background: 3 ballot issues for voter consideration. Ballot issue 3B is the competitive pool and ice rink sales tax increase and bond approval. Ballot issue 3C is the street fund sales and use tax permanent extension. And 3D is an amendment to the city charter to allow for 30-year leases of public property. Starting us off, let's have Ben step in to talk about the competitive pool and ice rink.
Okay, I'll do my best to paraphrase and not read, although we will have we'll each have a slide that we'll need to read verbatim, some fun stuff. So what we're being asked to do, what voters are being asked to do, increase sales and use tax, 0.18, those numbers, improve bonding, start to operate and maintain a competitive pool and ice rink facility with additional recreational amenities. The majority of the tax will be used to construct the facility. 0.03 will be used for ongoing operational maintenance, with the 0.15 sunsetting in 2039, and the bonds are paid off. 0.03 portion will not sunset because it is needed for ongoing operations and maintenance. So what that comes out to for residents is 0.18 equals 18 cents on each $100 purchase. So the competitive pool ice rink indoor facility will include a 10-lane, 50-meter pool that can be converted from the lengthwise to crosswise to a 20-lane, 25 pool. So that's a lot of lanes that you can have going at once. Also a National Hockey League sheet of ice. Both having spectator areas. leisure pool with a zero depth entry. If you've been to the rec center, similar sort of entry with water play features, area for warm water swim instruction. There'd also be a fitness workout area, a multi-purpose classroom. A little bit of history. So Centennial Pool opened in '74 and is the only competitive pool in town. Serves the high schools, USA swim teams, masters, triathletes, recreation swim teams. Also used for swim lessons, fitness classes, adaptive programs, all we do in aquatics. 88 hours per week it's open. About 63 of those are being used for programming. Centennial Pool attendance 200,000. Rec Center houses our only indoor leisure pool facility, and attendance each year at the Rec Center is 500,000. That's not unique people. That's visits. So one person may need 20 visits, not 500,000 different people every year. A little bit of history for the ice rink. The pavilion at Roosevelt Park open for 4 months of the year, from November through middle of November through middle of March, about. And the entirety of that is dedicated to programming, including some open skate. Pretty limited with the time we have over there due to the neighborhood constraints. And all hockey leagues are non-contact due to the boards can't be secured to the ground as they would need to be for that. So here's what I've got to read. Straight through. Longmont's population. Those in favor believe Longmont's population has more than doubled since the development of the pool facility 40 years ago. The existing pool can no longer meet the programming and competition needs of the community. The construction of a new facility with multi-use competitive pool, leisure pool, ice rink, and fitness area can help meet the current demands and future needs of city residents seeking and maintaining a healthy lifestyle. The new facility would give local access to year-round facilities for ice hockey, ice skating, and instructional ice programs. Those opposed believe construction of this project and payment of debt requires a sales tax increase. The city should find a different way to fund this type of project. The ice rink and competition aspects of this facility serve limited community interests. Longmont needs more facilities that can meet a wider range of recreational needs of its residents. User fees and charges will not be sufficient to cover the operation and maintenance costs of this facility and will require 0.03 of the sales tax to remain in place indefinitely. So we'll go back. So that's my part. Questions?
So I'm a hockey parent that started out here in Longmont and now plays elsewhere because you can only go so far. Is there a number out there about what, I mean, I spend money every time we go to a game in another community. I spend money in the community where he ends up playing hockey down Lafayette. Is there any number out there as part of the study as to sort of what it brings in to the community outside spending for hotels and restaurants and the competition aspect and all of those sorts of things?
Truthfully, I don't recall specifically.
Okay.
So that I know that was taken into consideration as a part of the study, but I don't recall the specific number or if there was a number.
Okay.
I can look that up and get and see and get back to you.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I mean, as a business owner and as a parent who knows they spend a ton of money when they do those kinds of things, I think that's a piece of the puzzle that's missing in the communication if you're for it, of course, because that's key. You can bring a lot of people into town.
I might have an answer for that. A rough answer, which is that the proponents of the concert hall looked up how much a visiting family spends, and I bet it wouldn't be that much difference.
And then the second thing was just, I also am thinking that the additional amenities, besides it's being billed as a sheet of ice and a pool, and not a sheet of ice, a leisure pool, an exercise room, yeah, and people are saying, well, it's limited, but I just learned that it's much more broad than that. So,
Try
Yeah,
to
so
put
that's
down the
interesting,
facts,
yeah.
the facts of what are
Yeah.
in the bond.
yeah,
That was my point too, is, we're voting on a pool and ice and recreation. Yet it's framed more as just ice. I think and I agree with that point, like it's a fitness center, there's classrooms, there's a lot of other amenities that I think the way it's presented, I don't think it gives it the service, the credit that it deserves in terms of the total package.
And I have my guidelines on exactly kind of my parameters on how I
So you talk about competitive pool, that type of thing. Will there be a competitive diving well for diving? Competitive diving?
that the specifics of that and some other have not been decided. That has not been decided. My understanding is that the diving has been a part of the initial design. The full extent of that would be decided.
Because, diving is usually part of a competitive
Yeah.
swimming. And
Yes.
so it feels like that would be a
Yeah. But
mistake.
if you're talking about platform, that they've all been discussed in the proposal and the feasibility study as well. I believe diving is a part of the correct idea.
So part of the feasibility study, there wasn't what is typically called an economic impact wasn't done?
I don't have those numbers with me. I'm not saying.
Well, I'm just wondering whether the economic impact study was completed, whether you have the numbers or not. Are you aware it was done?
I believe they did an economic study, economic impact study. Yes.
Okay,
And I
that
can
would
get
address your
out
questions.
Yes, and I can get out that information. I can get that back to you guys.
and the study's posted publicly
Yes,
somewhere, yeah.
yes.
City
It's
website?
on the city website.
Okay.
Absolutely. So I apologize. That's limited access I have right now.
Ben, you may not be able to answer this question. One of the things that have been talked about, of course, is the relationship between the school district and the city with regards to this particular project, if it passes. Going forward, is there an opt-out from the school district by not having to, if the agreement is all locked down, to not participate as far as pay for their portion of this such that it reverts back to the city? And maybe my understanding of that is incorrect, but I'm not 100% sure. That's why I said you may not be able to answer this question.
What I can tell you is the flip side of that is that there is a letter of intent from the school district to provide at the beginning, and that would, the ongoing number would be negotiated, but at the beginning, $357,000 per year for use and support of this facility. So we have a letter of intent from the school district for that.
Where I was going is through 2039.
So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason that the letter of intent and not a contract is Tabor does not allow you to engage in a contract unless you appropriate the funds for that. And it's not possible for the district to appropriate 39 years of funds.
So it is annually renewable.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions.
And so I think just to this point, when people say that the school district is not willing to sign a long-term contract to support this, that's
They're not able to.
they're not legally able to. So
Yeah.
anyone that says that they're not willing to is being duplicitous if they in fact know that law, which some people who say it publicly do know that law.
So question one is there an identified site for this?
There are 4 identified sites, starting west to east. The site at Dry Creek Park, which is south of Silver Creek, across the street from Altoona Middle School, to the south of the parking lot of that park, there was a placeholder on the original design of that park for a recreation center. That's one possible location. North of the new tennis courts at the recreation center is another possible location. Third is Centennial Park, and the part of the park that's been proposed is the track football area. And last would be the corner to the southwest at County Line and 66. And my understanding is the city's been in a land swap for that area. And that's the fourth identified location. So there are 4 possible locations.
And then, in terms of revenue stream, because obviously you're gonna need to manage that piece. So, is there any insight in terms of maybe, this is more of a city question, what's that process look like in terms of managing the revenue stream, what support is needed, and I guess just give a little bit context to that 0.03% and what does that provide for us indefinitely?
So the support of the facility. So in the study, the amount that is produced by this facility does not equal full operational support of the facility. So the 0.03 was figured in based on that gap between revenue, the school district, anticipation of the school district. So there was a remaining gap there. That's why the 0.03 was figured in. Now, as far as the ongoing, that would be just, to me, that would be just the same as how we run the recreation center or any of our facilities as far as year to year figuring a budget. Figuring out.
Do those have gaps as well?
Yes.
So the 3%, 0.03 was about 650,000 is what they identified the subsidy that's needed to run the facility after the revenue. So we left that in place rather than put a sunset on it because that would continue on. Presumably, if for some reason the revenue that we generate is greater than what is needed, it's still dedicated to that facility or to reducing or eliminating the debt sooner.
Does this assume that everything else that's operating today stays operating?
As far as
I mean, so I know you don't know a site. If it was Centennial, would Centennial Pool stay open too?
the feasibility study recommends that Centennial will not be a pool anymore. That would need to be decided as this facility is built. The same answer for the ice rink. We need to make those final decisions as to what to do. There is no funding within this to do anything additionally at either one of those sites. So that would be a decision that have to be made. But currently, the feasibility study recommends that we close Centennial as a competitive pool.
It seems like the utilization on the ice rink seems pretty good when it's open for what's there. I mean, it would seem okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, there seem to be lots of kids there skating
Yeah.
during open skate. And
Yeah, that's certainly recreation's belief is that there's a lot of use of that facility.
Okay.
And I think I outlined that the programming on there is every night we've got it programmed.
Yeah.
Quite a bit until it's 9 o'clock. It's got closed down.
So I know there's ice rink down, like you mentioned Lafayette, Superior. Is there anything north of us?
Loveland.
Oh, the Fort Collins, and then
Collins, for
Loveland on the other side.
Right.
I think it's still Loveland,
Loveland.
Windsor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are other ones out there.
Not Loveland proper, but I think.
Any others?
Good.
All right. Thank you everyone for being gentle.
All right, I will try not to put anybody to sleep. We're going to start, the next item is the permanent street fund tax extension. What are voters being asked to do? The City of Longmont is asking voters to make permanent the existing 3/4 cent street fund sales and use tax of the 3.53% sales and use tax. 3/4 cent of that is a temporary tax. It is the primary funding source for maintenance operations, safety improvements, and our capital construction of your streets and transportation system. What does this cost residents? This is an existing tax. There's no intention to raise it. This will not change the amount of sales tax that is currently paid on purchases of land. A little bit of tax history, going back, it was initially approved by voters in 1986. It has been extended a number of times, traditionally in a 5-year increment. The last increment was a 10-year increment in the 2014 election. That went into effect in 2016, so it does sunset in 2026. Some of the uses. It is used for the ongoing services and programs that serve the streets and transportation system. So snow and ice removal, street sweeping, pothole repair, some of the examples of our operations. Some of our asset management includes our pavement resurfacing program, which does include repairs to broken curb and sidewalk. Some of the improvements would be our capacity improvements, roadway widening project as an example, and intersection upgrades. Safety improvements, signs, traffic signals, striping, school crossing flashers is also included. Multimodal improvements, installing sidewalks, sidewalk connections, our underpasses, and our bike lanes that we've been working on expanding. The dollars generated from the street fund tax are also used by the city to meet our local match, to leverage the existing dollars for state grants, federal grants. We have a number of examples. When we redid Main Street, we got a CDOT grant that stretched those dollars. That's an example. South Pratt Parkway Bridge, we work with FEMA, received funding from them to expand the bridge. That's another example. We leveraged our dollars to extend it. Some of the arguments for and against. Those in favor believe a permanent street fund sales tax authorization allows Longmont to better plan and finance large or long-term projects and provide local funding for grant applications. Permanent street fund sales tax authorization continues cost sharing among all who make purchases in Longmont and benefit from the transportation system, not just residents and property owners. And then the renewal and maintenance of the transportation system and a stable funding stream is critical to Longmont's future. Those opposed believe that making the street fund sales tax authorization permanent would take away the city's incentive for accountability and transparency to our residents. The city should reprioritize services to allocate the necessary funding dollars to pay for projects and ongoing maintenance and operational needs. Finally, the street fund sales tax authorization should not be made permanent, as it is possible that more money will be collected than is needed if transportation becomes a lower priority. The last ballot issue is amending the city charter to allow for 30-year property leases. What are voters being asked to do? The city of Longmont is asking voters to change the city charter to allow for the lease of city property for up to 30 years. The city charter currently stipulates that the city cannot lease city property for more than 20 years. What does this cost residents? There's no cost for the change. Arguments for and against. Those in favor believe extending lease lengths to 30 years allows for additional public-private partnerships, as private partners are more likely to secure a 30-year loan. Private development of facilities like a higher education campus or convention or performing arts center is more attractive and less risky with longer leasing terms. 30-year leases give the city greater flexibility to manage development of land and facilities. The charter is outdated as many commercial leases run 30 years. Those opposed believe that the city should not enter into additional public-private partnerships. There is no need for agreements longer than 20 years on public land, as extension of these leases should require examination of current market rates in order to maximize revenue to the city. We do not need additional development in Longmont, and residents should not change the charter, which is the master document for city limits. Closing out real quick, additional information is available at longmontcolorado.gov/election. There is also several other choices for you. The mayor's ready for re-election, 3 city council seats are open, and the retention of a municipal judge. And that's it. So we can go back. Any questions?
Pretty straightforward.
Okay, I think you've done a great job then. No questions. I like that ice rink.
Thank you.
It is ice rink, right?
Yeah, right. Can you give that to Aaron?
Oh, I can.
And I'm gonna get it first called up. Oh, come on, Ben, stay.
Next thing.
You're welcome to stay.
Shouldn't have made that
I'm not sure of, it's gonna cost me to show you. Thank you.
The bell certainly works.
It does.
I mean, that's great. Nice sound. Nice loud sound.
That's right.
Awesome place.
That's right.
I'm gonna sit down right here so that I'm not like looking at your guys' backs, because I'm gonna be able to see Jim's face as I present. So thanks for giving me some time on your agenda. What I want to talk about today is the Longmont Main Street Corridor Plan, and we're in the midst of wrapping up this 12-month process. So we've been to the board several times. This will probably be the last time you see me at least talking about this. And I also want to thank Kimberly and Kirsten for participating a lot throughout this planning process on our technical advisory committee. And so please feel free to jump in during the presentation if you have observations, things to add, things that I forget or want to correct me. Also, just by way of introduction, I think I know most of you, but I'm Erin Fostick and I'm with the city's Planning and Development Services Department. So as I mentioned, we have talked to this board several times. This has been going on. We kicked this off in late 2018. We spent some time looking at the 5-mile long corridor. Today we'll really be focused on the downtown section, obviously, but this plan looked at the Main Street corridor all the way from Plateau Road on the south to Highway 66 on the north. So it is a pretty robust corridor, looking at a couple blocks on either side. We did a lot of existing conditions analysis, looking at land use, transportation, redevelopment and market opportunities. We developed recommendations. You saw some of those early on. I have a little bit more detail today. And then we've really been focused on how do we implement this plan and putting the draft plan together, and it is available now. As we developed those recommendations, we looked at corridor-wide recommendations. So what could apply to the whole 5-mile long corridor? A lot of those are really focused on transportation and that multimodal network. We also looked at specific recommendations within each of the character areas. And those are really, we set those 4 character areas up as places that were similar in terms of their land use patterns, the way that Main Street functioned, kind of some of the redevelopment opportunities. And so you'll see that in just a second. Last time I talked to you, I think I did present some of the initial catalyst concepts. And for the downtown area, we really built on what you all started talking about at your board meeting. I guess that was earlier this year or late last year? February, okay. And so you'll see these varying levels of recommendations. Just as a reminder, we have 4 character areas. Again, we'll be focused on downtown, which runs from 11th down to the creek. But we also have North Main and Midtown, which would be north of downtown, and then South Main running from the creek down to Plateau. And these, again, group areas and similar characteristics. You'll see a lot of recommendations, particularly in the 3 character areas we won't be talking about today, that are similar. But we have paid some special attention to downtown, obviously, as it's a real special place in Longmont. Oops. So as we think about the corridor, again, this is the whole 5-mile long corridor. So really what we're doing here is building off the framework that was laid in the Envision Longmont multimodal and comprehensive plan. And so some of this will apply to the downtown area, but again, thinking about corridor wide, how do we really add some additional residential uses? How do we continue to add mixed use in the corridor? How do we think about preserving the historic buildings and buildings that contribute to community character? Obviously, a lot of those are in the downtown area, but through our existing conditions analysis, there are buildings that are worth taking a look at in some of these other areas. Thinking about how we continue to diversify our economic base and thinking about how do we do that through strategic infill of vacant or underutilized parcels. Thinking about how do we transition to the neighborhoods that are on either side of Main Street in the study area. Thinking about how we add green spaces and more public spaces. Again, in the downtown area, there are a lot more green spaces, public plazas, breezeways, but in some of the other areas that came up quite a bit through our outreach as something that was really needed that people wanted to see. And then again, through this, looking at some of those nearer term opportunities, This area is one of the corridors that's designated as an area of change, but really thinking at a smaller scale of some of those catalytic projects that can really spur some redevelopment within the corridor. And finally, this overarching goal, if you'll recall, of creating the overall sense of place in the corridor. As I mentioned, a lot of the corridor-wide recommendations really relate to transportation. And so what we're proposing corridor-wide is thinking about where there are opportunities to create additional street connections. So we have a great grid in parts of the corridor, but how can we add additional streets to complete that grid in some areas? Thinking about how do we add additional medians along Main Street. Obviously, we have those in some areas of the downtown character area, but thinking about adding those in other areas along Main, which will also give us the ability to have additional mid-block crossings at strategic locations. Really the kind of overarching, if you remember back to when we talked about goals, thinking about how we move people in this corridor, how we move people safely, how we make sure that we are enhancing or at least maintaining mobility and improving connectivity. We know that there's some areas of the corridor, particularly along North Main, that have higher crash incidents involving pedestrians that are already crossing at these mid-blocks that aren't mid-blocks, and so thinking about how we can do that more safely. And there are some recommendations for downtown as well. Thinking about how we create some parallel bicycle routes to Main. We know that people are bicycling on Main, but we also know that some people don't really want to do that, and so can we create better connections on the east and west side? Where are there areas where we can enhance alleys? Obviously, we have some great examples downtown of where that's already working. How can we extend that to other areas, both within downtown as well as other character areas? And then continually evaluating signal timing on Main, which I know is a big priority for the downtown in particular. Thinking more critically about those bicycle and pedestrian recommendations. Again, I already mentioned thinking about creating those alternative routes, and we've identified what those might be. Thinking about how we separate the facilities, both separating bike facilities from cars, but also potentially separating bicyclists and pedestrians as they have different needs. And so we've identified some different ways we might do that through intersection improvements, through different facility types. And so really thinking about how do we do that to create that continuous, pleasant walking environment. We already have that in the core of downtown. How can we pull that north and south? Within the plan, we have several cross sections, and these are contained in a plan appendix. This is an example of what the ultimate cross section would look like from 2nd to Boston. So this is a view looking north. I will say, as I looked at some of these cross sections, they do need to be reviewed in a little bit more detail. This is the draft plan, but thinking about what that existing cross section looks like and what it could look like at a full build out. So some of the things that we really tried to look at throughout the entire corridor are reducing the lane widths along Main, which can help calm speeds, help create a better walking and biking environment, create a more safe environment even for cars. Thinking about raised medians along the whole corridor, and so in some areas, even in the downtown, there's not medians separating north and southbound traffic, so how could we have those raised medians with mid-blocks? How could we potentially include an elevated bike lane in sections of the corridor? So in addition to a sidewalk or side path that you'd have for pedestrians, how could you incorporate some type of facility for bicyclists as well? And then of course, how do you have some of that green space and landscaping in this section as well? As we think about these corridor-wide recommendations, we spent a lot of time really thinking about how do we implement this, so how do we actually do something? And so we have recommendations in phasing in a number of categories ranging from land use and transportation to public realm and green infrastructure. And so within each of those recommendations, we've provided some high-level information on who would be primarily responsible. Would it be planning and development services? Would it be the LDDA? Would it be the development community? And so we've tried to identify folks that would be involved. We've also tried to identify what the priority level would be, low, medium, high, a cost range. And so the easiest way to think about that is when you're looking at a hotel or a restaurant, is it $1 sign or is it $4? And then finally, what's the ease of implementation? Is it something that would be relatively easy to do? Or is it something that's going to take a lot of coordination and a lot of money? And so if you think about how we can combine all those things and maybe initially look at high priority, low cost, easy to implement, those might be areas where we can really start to focus. We've also identified a number of funding and financing tools that could be available. So thinking about tax increment financing, thinking about opportunity zones, And so thinking about what those tools are at the federal, state, and local level, and obviously the DDA has some tools already in your toolbox that we've taken a look at. And then finally, we have a number of code amendments. Again, this is really thinking about from the city perspective, would City Council want to recommend that we make additional changes to the land development code to facilitate the type of development that we're talking about? You may remember that we've been here talking to you about changes to our code, and we already have mixed-use zoning in this corridor along the whole stretch, but there may be some additional things we want to think about in terms of urban gathering spaces, building heights and transitions, design standards, things of that nature, and so we have some code recommendations in the plan. With regard specifically to the downtown character area, we've obviously done a lot of research about the role that downtown plays today, and I don't really think I need to go into this because you're all intimately familiar with downtown. But what we do know is downtown is really kind of the civic cultural heart of the community, and so really thinking about how do we build on that, and also how do we continue to recognize the investment that we're making here and build on that, particularly as we think about First and Main. So with regard to the vision that's been developed for downtown, a lot of this really builds off the great work that's in the master plan that you all adopted in 2017. So thinking about how do we look at strategic infill, there are some areas, and remember when we're talking about downtown in the context of the Main Street plan, it's really from 11th to the Creek, so it's bigger than the downtown that you guys are thinking of, but how do we create some interest in infill and redevelopment, particularly adding residential and mixed use, thinking about what those residential opportunities are and the mix of residential types of uses. A lot of what we're recommending here deals with multimodal transportation, thinking about prioritizing pedestrians, continuing to enhance the streetscape, thinking about medians and mid-block crossings in additional areas. And then a lot of these recommendations really deal with parking. So how can we think about using shared parking consistent with the master plan? How can we maybe consider redeveloping some of the surface lots, incorporate more structured parking into downtown? And really thinking about the curb space and the street itself. How can we continue to evolve curb space as parking needs change? And so a lot of what you'll see in this area is related to transportation. More specifically, thinking about those areas, and particularly in the 1 and 200 blocks, we're going to have the First and Main transit station and that transit-oriented development. So how can we increase density in that area? How can we maybe utilize the grade that exists, the hill that exists there? How can we pull the streetscape that already is in kind of this 300 to 600 block area, north and south? How can we build on that? So thinking about things, again, I've said it 8 times already, medians, mid-blocks, but also potentially wider sidewalks in some areas, street trees, more landscaping, street furniture, things like that. And then really thinking about how do we, as we're pulling kind of this downtown further south, how do we create some meaningful connections both to the transit station as well as to areas like the Dickens Farm Nature area and the River Corridor. So in particular, we've really taken a look at this 1 and 200 block, and many of you participated with us late last year when we had some we did kind of a charrette with the 200 block owners and really thought about what would they like to see in this block. And really, as South Main Station's going up, that in and of itself is a catalytic project. And so what additional things could happen in this area? And so, again, thinking of this notion of infill, there's some parking lots in this area, there's some underutilized buildings. How do we increase density on both sides of Main to kind of help create that street frontage? How can we encourage more residential here? Thinking about the slope of the hill, both to allow us to potentially look at additional building height here, but also maybe to leverage that hill for some structured parking opportunities. You'll see in this graphic there are some structured parking shown here, and so thinking about how we continue to build on that. And then really thinking about kind of that experience-oriented destination uses. So this is something I think you guys talked about at your board meeting, and thinking about how does that continue to kind of build in this area. In particular, what are some of the things that downtown really offers? Obviously, the DDA already has some tools and utilizes tax increment financing. The Southeast Urban Renewal area is also present south of the downtown. And so thinking about what those boundaries could look like and what that financing mechanism could look like. thinking about the existing GID and could that general improvement district be expanded to focus on some of those improvements that we're recommending in the plan? And so you'll see that here. Obviously, we have the opportunity zone, enterprise zone designations in this area, and so thinking about how we promote that and leverage that with the private sector. And then really thinking about within those catalyst sites, the city has some parking. There's obviously private landowners that are interested. So how can we support redevelopment through shared parking strategies, potentially through parking structure, and really thinking about those types of opportunities. So I just want to close in really thinking about, we spent a lot of time talking with not only advisory boards and folks like you all, but the community at large. And so we've done a lot of specific business outreach. We've gone door to door in the corridor. We mailed information out to property owners. We've had some traditional public workshops. We've done some online surveys and had a lot of social media interaction. We've used our new Engage Longmont site and had some help from the Times Call and the Observer. And so we feel like we've gotten a lot of really great feedback that we've been able to incorporate into the plan. And so our next steps really, we'll be going to Planning Commission tonight for a formal recommendation. We're hoping to get a recommendation from this board that we can share with City Council. We'll be going to City Council to hopefully have them accept this plan on October 22nd. And then that's really when the work begins in terms of thinking about how we implement the plan and really putting this into practice. So with that, I'd love to open it up for questions, discussion, and certainly, as I mentioned, if you all have anything you'd like to add, please do so.
Yeah, one thing I'll just add is that when Kirsten and I were at the advisory committee meeting, it wasn't branded as downtown, it was branded as Old Town or Original Town or something, but there was a lot of discussion around, I think, specifically in Longmont, people think of Old Town as the historic neighborhoods that flank downtown and really call this area downtown. And I think the group was trying to be mindful of, we consider downtown an area that is bound by our funding and that type of thing. However, the community may not think of that as the same definition. And so Kirsten and I both said it probably makes more sense. It gives this identity as to where it is and it's a little more accurate. And so I just wanted to point out that was a change that we felt made sense in its entirety.
Everyone's looking at you.
I know. It's such a comprehensive process. I mean, I learned a ton about what makes people feel comfortable biking or walking, and it's amazing the things that I'd never thought of. You have businesses in 2 parts of Maine, and you're like, oh, that's why it doesn't feel good. That's why sometimes I drive to Chipotle across the street, because it doesn't feel good to walk around, or that's why down here, it works here and it doesn't work there. And so the number of factors that have been taken into account in terms of this plan are mind-boggling, actually. I think the number of data points that they put together, that you guys put together, are just out of control. And I think that the Catalyst project for downtown, the Catalyst area, is entirely appropriate, given where we kind of are in our evolution as a community here in the downtown Catalyst area. And so it's great to have some real kind of focus as to all these great professional recommendations and what we should do down here to really bring the remainder in to the downtown community.
And I think if you remember the planning charrettes that we did, especially around the 200 block, which is what this board identified as an absolute priority, especially with what's going on in the 100 block and connecting that up, was really good conversations, lots of property owner participation, and some of the key things, again, that Erin said, she probably said 100 times, extending those medians, extending those things. We've done a lot of work to make sure that our streetscape goes down to First and Main. However, without the medians, people aren't recognizing those efforts. They're still feeling like it's completely different, although the sidewalks have the same treatment, there's the same banners, there's the same light poles. It's really that built environment as you're driving up Main Street feeling disconnected. And some of the work we've done around zoning, that if people are going to fully redevelop buildings, they have to front the street, they have to do different things that aren't done now, which is what's giving some of those a different character. So I do feel like this plan is another good touchstone and roadmap, especially as we see people that are looking to make investments, not only in the DDA, but near and around the DDA. And I get calls from people that are doing stuff just outside the boundaries or just whatever, and they still want to know kind of our vision, what we're looking for, how they could tie into that vision. So I do think this is a great tool to tie in everything immediately south, immediately north, as well as north. So I commend you, Erin. You did a great job, and you always do, pulling this together. And so I thank you.
So, it's definitely a good example of collaboration and community outreach. So, Kirsten, thank you, and Kimberly for, being heavily involved through this process and just really not losing focus of all the great work that we've done in the past, all the way to 2012, the first in-Main revitalization study, which that's where it started. We have to use our imagination, but then be smart around our planning. And this just builds on that. So it captures first in Main, it captures our master plan in the right way, envision, and so we're just continuing to progress. So it's impressive. My question for you, Erin, though, is so when it comes to prioritizing, medium, low, high priorities in terms of development, can you give a little bit of the so what factors contribute to how we prioritize our projects? Identify the catalyst before that you highlighted.
I think it's not all within our control, and by our, I mean kind of the public sector. We get that question a lot, and it's even at the community meeting that we had earlier this month, we got the question of well, which part of the corridor are you starting? Are you going to start in south and then just move north? And it's well, probably not. There's a lot of factors that go into thinking about that prioritization, and we don't have, and I don't expect that we will have a list that says this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. But when we look at all those recommendations together and take cost, ease of implementation, and kind of community priority as a whole, we can say, okay, these are really rising to the top. So a good example that came up a ton during the public process is at existing mid-blocks, people really want to see some type of signal, be that a rapid flashing beacon or something. And so, that's something that is probably relatively easy to implement. It has a relatively low cost, and is, based on what we've heard from the community, a pretty high priority. So that could be something that could be a near-term implementation item. Putting medians along the entire 5-mile corridor, that's going to take some coordination. That's going to take some working with CDOT as well as some budget to do. So those types of things we'll probably do in stages. For example, CDOT's already working on projects at 3 intersections, so those would likely be the first 3 areas where we'd start to see some initial median treatments. Frankly, I think the area just south of us, in the 1 and 200 block, is probably the area that we would, if I had a crystal ball and said what would happen first, that would be the area I would say we would prioritize investment, because we've already done that by our commitment to the station area planning, thinking about that area, the investments that are being made at South Main Station, the work that City Council's doing in their work plan, focusing on the river corridor. Everything is just really coalescing in that area. So in terms of kind of a geographic area of prioritization, I would say that would likely be it. But certainly, there's areas that are there's a lot of development interest, for example, in some areas in Midtown, kind of around that 15th Avenue area. And so, as the development community comes in with proposals and is making development applications, there's things that we would require of them that would then trigger additional investments. And so we'll just kind of have to wait and see. This plan is going to be set up in a way that I think it needs to be flexible and adapt. Certainly if if RTD or CDOT are making investments, we would want to leverage that. If the DDA is going to do something, we'd want to figure out how we work with you guys on things. So,
And just so you guys know, I mean, meetings Kimberly and I sat in on, yes, there was all the community outreach at the events and the survey and all of those sorts of things, but CDOT was at the meetings we were at, RTD was at the meetings we were at, city planning and transportation and Boulder County, and so really there's a real comprehensive group of people, and it's interesting because the desires don't always align. You know, CDOT's priority and RTD's priorities might not even be the same when you talk about the way the streets are structured, but all of those entities have been involved in the process, or at least aware and providing feedback. So it's not like it's in a vacuum.
So from your experience kind of going forward, what's most challenging about maintaining the integrity of the plan?
I mean, certainly I think we have a limited amount of money, right, to implement the plan, and some of what we're talking about is somewhat costly. I think change is always hard for people, and so that's going to be an ongoing conversation. If we sort of laid the framework with Envision of accommodating growth in these centers and corridors, and if we start to see that, what does that really look like, and how does the community respond? And then certainly I think in all reality, to your point, there's the ongoing challenge of working with CDOT. And so I think they're at the table, they're generally buying off on some of these things, but there's definitely a lot of work to do, particularly as we think about, medians and mid-block crossings. I think there's going to be some interesting and potentially challenging conversations with businesses in some areas when we start talking about access consolidation and closing access. I mean, those are going to be challenging conversations, and so the plan is making those recommendations. How hard or not we stick to those, I think depends kind of on those ongoing conversations. But maybe ask that question in a couple of years.
I think they were also very considerate of, you pick a catalyst project, and for us, the catalyst area is already in play, right? I mean, it's already being talked about. The property owners there know. The LDDA is hoping that that's developed and those sorts of things. But there were some areas, I would say particularly in Midtown, where they were sensitive to what do you guys think about when we present this catalyst idea to people who already have businesses there and people who already own property there. And they were very considerate about, how do we present this? And I think that it's going to be presented as only opportunity, and not opportunity to bring only new things in, but to enhance what's already there. And so for existing businesses to do better, they were considerate of that.
Okay.
We need a motion. I move to support the Main Street Corridor Plan and move it to the City Council on 22nd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Good to go. Aaron, you have our blessing.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thanks for your
welcome.
time.
Would anyone that can't reach the caramels and mints like them?
Oh, really? And you can't reach the You haven't moved the money.
That woke everybody up.
I know.
You ready?
Yep. Just go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, no, we're having, so everyone knows we're now gonna do a parking study update.
As as you all know, we updated our 2016 parking data, and it was in your packet. And we're not going to go through all of it. I just wanted to talk about some of the highlights as to what we're looking at. When we looked at the overall parking data and compared it, we did a comparison. Let's see what's right here.
Borrow my glasses?
No, I'm just gonna jump into the inner circle here. I'm sorry.
Just borrow my glasses.
It's nothing to do with my age, it's just
I didn't
really
say
bad
that. I didn't say
screen.
anything about it.
So what we are seeing, and one of the things that we really looked at is when you're looking at your parking system overall, you want more people to park in your off-street lots than your on-street lots. So you want to make sure that your street parking is turning over fairly rapidly. People that are staying longer are choosing your off-street lots. And so we did see during the 2019 study that we're seeing more people off-street, but we're also seeing system-wide that our parking is more distributed. So in 2016, we saw that there were some significant hotspots, and I'm sure we all know and have arrived there and realized that there's no parking. But a lot of our system overall was not being utilized. So now we are seeing people take advantage of other parking that may just be a little bit further away. This was the peak occupancy that we saw during the parking study time. Blue means there's still 50% or more available within that parking lot. Red is getting up to that 90%. So again, those are our absolute hot spots. Green, it goes blue, green, yellow, then red. Really no surprise, this is the 500 East lot. That's where we get a lot of our parking. This is the 600 West lot, which is across the street, which used to be a pretty hidden gem, right? Not too many people were knowing to park there. We've done a great job educating people between 2016 and 2019, and so now that one is pretty heavily utilized. And then you're seeing down here the 300 East parking lot. Some of that we suspect is because of displaced parkers from all of the work that they're doing at the Civic Center, which will be done this year, do you know? Okay. Which will eventually at some point.
It's not like that cathedral in Barcelona.
So our very peak time of data collection is around 2:30 on the Thursday. We did a data collection on the weekend as well as data collection during the weekday. So although all kinds of parking were operating kind of below their capacity, as you can see, there was more off-street parking being utilized, and there are still hotspots. And so we need to continue monitoring this. When they talk about the efficiency on when you really are having a true parking challenge or you need to make some significant changes, is when system-wide you get at about 85%. Right now, overall system-wide, we're at about 56 to 59%. You can see some of those lots, some of those times are a little bit higher. In the parking industry, they really say once you're getting system-wide about 65%, it's really important for you to start deciding what is it that you're going to do, how are you going to make some real long-term changes. By the time that gets to 70%, if you are thinking of things like paid parking and that type of thing, you really need to get your systems in place. If you wait till you're at 85% of your capacity, you're having a problem that's going to be very hard to overcome. And so it's really important that we do continue to kind of update this data, see what kind of percentage we are, and trying to make those small term changes and those interim changes, such as we did between 2016 and 2019. We changed some time durations. We looked at some shared parking models. We did some different things to kind of help offset that problem. This was the first year that we did collect data on Emory Street, specifically because we did get requests from the Circle Side neighborhood of how parking is encroaching into what they're doing. Again, we did see some peaks there. The peak collection time there was about 63% at 5 p.m. Again, the only place where you saw a significant amount of parking is, again, around that Civic Center area. That was the one that looked really high. The rest of the system still had capacity. But again, it gives us a benchmark to continue to kind of look at that area and see how changes or things are being affected. One of the things that could happen in this area in the future, if needed, is working with the city to create some kind of neighborhood permit program on that street like they do around Longmont High School. The parking study did not recommend this today, but did recommend continuing to look at that, and then at some point, if you are at a point where it's needed, looking at that as an option. When we look at parking duration, one of the things that we see is that we had a reduction of vehicles on street during peak, but there was an increase of about 43% of cars system-wide. So we didn't see as many on the street. We saw them distributed more in off-street lots and in other places around downtown. When we looked at that duration, it was interesting. This is Thursday and this is Saturday. People are staying about the same amount of time, whether you're monitoring the time parking or not. So we are seeing those trips are about the same amount of time. So again, the on-streets have a shorter average stay, which is what you want, so that's a very good thing. You're seeing longer off-street. And that duration is about 2 hours and 46 minutes is what we're seeing people do. We also tracked movement. What we wanted to see was, are people working the system, or are they moving their cars around in the day? Split in a very bad spot. 171 cars moved within our parking system in the day. Our parking consultant said that was an extraordinarily high amount of people that are moving within the day. The average car that was moved 2.7 times a day. 49 of those cars, which was about 28%, moved solely within private facilities or other facilities for all-day parking. So they might have been parked in COSOL and then went and parked the RTD lot or something for some reason. 74 of those vehicles, 43%, moved solely within time-limited facilities. So those are people that really are moving their cars so they can get together. And the remaining 48 vehicles, or 21%, moved between time-restricted and private all-day lots. So this shows where and how people were moving and what they were doing. Lots of people moving from one side of Main Street to the other. They did do some just casual conversations with people, and hear over and over again that people find it hard still to cross Main Street, long wait times. So again, significant number of vehicles that move or repark. And then the movement appeared to be both evading time limits, convenience, just not really wanting to walk to their next destination. There were 126 permitted vehicles that were recorded within the study area. 110 of them were where they were supposed to be. And they did look at those that were not where they were supposed to be, where they were and why. Most of them you can see are in our really high-term lots, 500 East, lots of people. So there were about 6 people that were near on-street, that type of thing. 300 East, a few people. But really overall system-wide, if you have a permit, you're highly likely to get a space in where you're wanting to park. Violations. When we look at violations and we look at enforcement, this is the place where I think we all have known that we can do better. Parking enforcement on that day issued 21 overtime citations between Kimbark, 3rd Avenue, and those parking lots on that side. There were approximately 40 overtime parking violations during that time based on our data. So 21 tickets were issued, there were 40 that could have been issued. One of the things is because the parking enforcement data for that day was done by 2:08 and our peak time was at 2:30, people are staying longer than that. The enforcement that was provided on that day really only covered about 23% of the parking supply of which we have system-wide. So there can be a more robust effort for enforcement to be able to make sure that we're getting the turnover. Again, so the violation hours have decreased by 83%, while there were more vehicles observed within the study area, utilizing both off-street and long-term parking. And the resources that were provided, we need to kind of continue to grow those, have more successful parking, and that the parking fines give little incentive to comply with regulations. And there is a chart right here, a chart that is showing how we compare against other folks in the Front Range. One of the things that many other people do that we do not is they have an escalating scale rolling on 12 months. So you get your first ticket, it might stay what it is today. If you get your second ticket within that year, it would be more. Your third ticket would be even more. It's really incentivizing people to, we've heard, and we've had people turn in their parking permit that says, well, I've done the math, kids are good, I won't get more than 4 tickets, it'll be less than a permit. And so people are actually laying those kind of odds when they're deciding how they're going to be parking. And so they really recommended for another short-term change, if we wanted to ever look at that, would be looking at possibly recommending an escalating scale for those that continue to work the system. So again, basically, it was a really good touch point. We saw the occupancy actually go down from 59% to 56%. So we are seeing people park less time, so not being as taxed in the system. And again, there are still though several parking lots that exceed that 85% utilization. We hope, I think, as a board, that some of that, those 2 red lots were where we're adding the parking structure, so we will be adding parking supply within that part of downtown. And throughout what we're doing on Kaufman Street, and hopefully once we get a parking structure down at First and Main, how do we use Kaufman Street to be a corridor to move people up and down and have more parking there. Again, those movements and subsequent reparking were incredibly excessive, and we can work more on it. So I just wanted to give you a high-level overview. It's in your packet, and happy to answer any other questions you have.
Great job, no questions
Thank you.
on parking.
Parking.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Oh, this is cool stuff here. New business, and since we're in this space, we now have Longmont.
Pop up, yes. No, I wish. Sergio is here from the LEDP, and we have been talking about how do we get more untested retail or untested folks that are thinking that they want to get into the market, they maybe want to do something, but they're not ready quite to sign a lease. How can we give them opportunities in our community, and what can we look at? As you all know, we were working with a tenant for our front space. Ultimately, that did not work out because the space, once we looked at it, was not large enough, and the floor probably couldn't support the machinery of which they were going to have. However, they are going to be moving right next door, and they're going to be our neighbors. So we are still able to get them here, just in a different fashion. But that did leave the front of our store, or the front of our retail space that we were hoping empty. Sergio had an idea about some pop-up opportunities. We had said, oh, well, this falls through, and it did. We didn't think it would, but maybe we could look at it. So we worked together to put together, there's information in your packet. This is a website of what it would look like that Sergio put together. And we can just talk a little bit about what that is. So we want to support local entrepreneurs and artisans by providing an affordable option to test and validate their ideas. We would have an application for people to get in touch with us. And we really looked at the space as 3 different zones. The front could be about a 400 square foot retail space. This wall, we were thinking about having a kind of shelf space or rented space for handmade or handcrafted goods that people are making or selling throughout Boulder County or near and around Boulder County. And then this back office here, having that be some type of artist studio. And so, kind of looking at that, and feel free to pop in whenever you want to.
Pop up, pop up.
Pop up, pop
There
in.
you go.
There you go, sir. You got it.
So this would be a partnership to look at those short-term or month-to-month to either test your product or test your retail idea. So why would we do this? It's going to offer an affordable option for local retail or artisan manufacturers to test their ideas, offer some studio space for working artists. They can have a retail outlet here, connect business owners with real storefront experience. I think this would also help those that are taking a risk on a first timer for a longer term lease. It would show that they've had a proven concept of what kind of success that they've had as they try to make those leasing decisions. Again, for future potential independent retailers, one of the things that we could see happening is if someone was thinking about maybe they'd open a second location here, maybe they would do another product line here, it help those established businesses just kind of see for a little bit of what it looks like around here. Offer business services and resources, so we would partner with E4All. We would also partner with the Small Business Development Center. We wouldn't do any programming, but we would get into their networks and have them certainly do that. We also, Sergio reached out to John Schallert. He is directly across the street to see if he had any interest in hopping over and talking to these folks, maybe giving them some ideas. Certainly, the hope would be to generate more sales tax for the city and to attract more foot traffic into downtown Longmont. We looked at other pop-up retail opportunities around the country. I also looked at the International Downtown Association and kind of figured out some of these principles of what they're doing. Again, we were thinking a 3-month duration would be helpful, and we split it up November to January, February to April, May to July, August to October, trying to give folks, it's, you know, we've seen it time and time again, someone pops up for one weekend and they're like, I nailed it, and then they get in way over their head, not realizing that there are ebbs and flows of what's happening. So we thought that 3 months was a good pop-up duration. Looking at the shelves, this would be something easier that people could just rent a shelf space. We also think it would be a good showcase of just those kind of things that are built and made in our community. It would be another retail operation, but be more just kind of a showcase of the kind of things that are made. And then the art studio, it's about 85 square feet in there, and just having kind of a working artist within that. We thought maybe anywhere from 3 to 12 months, 1 to 12 months, we can kind of look at that. When we look at costs, we're thinking about $400 in the front for a 3-month duration. The shelf space, $30 a month to rent the shelf space, plus 20% of those sales revenues that would happen there. And the art space would be $100 per month. If there was an artist that was producing things or using that as a studio, they could have stuff out on the shelves, but there wouldn't be a percentage of those since they would be paying a lease rate within that space. Hours of operation, certainly we want participants in that pop-up retail store to be open 6 days a week. Open mostly until 7 p.m. on certain days. We're thinking at least Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Participants would have to staff those on evenings, weekends, hopefully in the day they would be here to staff. We're thinking definitely have them open Saturday and Sunday, probably closed Monday. Maybe even Monday and Tuesday. I think that's a discussion that we can talk about. And then looking at the participants would have to sign a short-term lease with us. They would have to have insurance to cover kind of our needs in the space. And what you can't see is they also would have to have any licenses, sales and use tax, everything that they need to operate a business within the state of Colorado and the city of Longmont. We do have some retail fixtures that we got from the Foot Locker when the mall closed, and we have them in storage, and we use them for our space at Roosevelt Park Apartments. If they wanted to rent those, we would rent them to them, but ideally we would hope that they could bring in their own fixtures and that type of thing for what they want to do. We do, the vendor would be responsible for setting up their own point of sale system, and we would work, at first we thought we would supply one, but we think that might be a little bit harder. But we did get some calls to see if maybe we can work with a bank or someone like that that could help them and set up their own point of sale system if they don't have one, to be able to do that. We also would ask for weekly revenue reports, just so we can see how their sales are being generated and what they're doing within their space. So again, those requirements, they would have to maintain hours per the requirements. And I think we would look at the retailer or look at what they're doing and kind of shift those hours. So we're not necessarily saying these are the hours that you have to do. I think we could look at a case by case basis. But again, we don't want someone who's open 11 to 2 or something. It's going to have to be something that's engaging kind of retail. They would have to remit all necessary sales tax on everything that they're doing, have a certificate of insurance and liability, obtain all those permits, sign a waiver of liability for any personal or property damage, maintain a fully stocked inventory, provide the fixtures and rent them, keep and maintain the storefront in a professional manner. Merchandise must be unique and complement the current downtown retail establishments. We wouldn't have a pop-up retailer that's doing the exact same thing as someone else down here.
Spatulas.
Right, yeah. Wine. So it would have to be something that complements. No food service. However, if they did prepackaged food, those kind of things would be fine, but probably wouldn't open a coffee shop or wouldn't open something that they're cooking, those kind of things. And again, if you did rent that shelf space, it would have to be created, designed, or crafted by one of our local creatives. It couldn't be a bunch of goods, that were made in China that you shipped over and then sold on the shelves.
Something special.
Things like that. So Sergio, do you want to talk a little bit more about your all's interest in doing this?
I mean, this is basically a retail incubator. So again, it's effectively what the mission is. So we're creating a pipeline for entrepreneurs and local artisans to test and validate their ideas cheaply. So once entrepreneurs are able to do that and they can validate their products, are able to move on to the next step. So it also eases the burden of an entrepreneur getting into the retail component. So that's basically what we're doing.
Does everyone know Sergio? Know of him? Can you maybe give us
Sure,
a brief
yeah.
background?
Sergio Angelis, I work for Longmont Economic Development Partnership. My role is Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship.
How would that affect the use of this space for meetings?
Yeah, it's one of the questions.
Well, so this space here, other than the shelves over there, this space would still be open, so there would be no merchandise or anything in this part of the space. I think there would be, the retail store could very well be operating while we're having these meetings. But again, our meetings are all open to the public, so I don't know that it would matter. We would just need, if someone came in and wanted to look, that might be a little bit harder. So I think during these meetings, maybe the shelf space in the art studio would not be accessible. They could come in and listen, but it might be too distracting for shoppers at that time.
Then if we needed to be an executive session.
Go ahead.
We go into the cone of silence.
The one piece of feedback I have, when I looked at sort of the months,
Yes.
and having all too familiar with retail months,
Yes.
is some of those months are way more valuable than others. And I see what you did from November to January.
Yeah. Trying to split that as we did.
You might consider, I'm not saying that the LDDA needs to make more money overall, but you might consider
I'll make
a premium or maybe taking her down from February to April, and it just, some of those are just way more valuable than others. Even the shelf space. I mean, the traffic is gonna mean everything, but you might have a premium for November to January. January is not gonna be fun, but November and December are so key. I think you're gonna have a lot of demand for those, and maybe you can kind of curb that by leveling or not leveling the rent, but by setting.
Yeah, that was the only question I had. Is there any flexibility here as far as that piece goes? I looked at that and went, I can tell you which ones I'm not gonna take. That would be my, if I was starting up, so.
If you were doing a pop-up.
But I'm not,
So.
so.
You're thirsty.
It's not.
So my perspective, I love this, Sergio. Every time you can partner with the LEP on a project is good, right? Accelerator. this summer.
That's the plan.
Retail's tough, right? With Amazon crushing the market share, every year, 20% increases year after year after year. So to have an opportunity like this, I think it's unique. The question I have for us though, is this really what we want to be doing in terms of managing? For example, some of the reasons why we go into business is because of the autonomy of not having to report and have somebody managing us. So do we really want to have the expectation of an entrepreneur reporting their sales on a regular basis? Is that necessary? Yeah. So there's things to think about in terms of, okay, like merchandising, they should have unique merchandise, but maybe something just in alignment with our master plan. Trying to keep things as loose as possible for the entrepreneur. Hours of operation too, trust me, I understand why. We want to have folks in our downtown in the evenings, especially on Sundays, right? But, retail, brick and mortar being, hindered to certain hours, it's another thing to think about. So making things a little bit looser there, I would suggest. Because we don't want to be, how are we going to manage it if somebody isn't complying on hours, right? Is that really something that we want to be responsible for as an LDDA? And I understand why, right? It is supporting our master plan, but just some things to think about.
Yeah, and I think those are all good thoughts, and I think
Yeah.
we hope that this will be a work in progress, that we're trying to figure out a starting point, and wanted to see if you all were willing to have this be a starting point, and really see what kind of feedback we get, hearing from people, working with them, so I hear what you're saying, and maybe monthly sales or weekly sales is too cumbersome, but I think a report at the end to see kind of what kind of impact this made would be pretty important, so we
And
can.
it's not uncommon, like my landlord asked to see my financials at any time,
Yeah.
that's in my
You
lease.
can include it in the lease.
Yeah, that's not uncommon, and that's my financials, not just my revenue.
Monthly is different than weekly.
Monthly would probably be a
But
better.
in this case here, all that's gonna be balanced out by the fact that it's only for 3 months. Okay, so I do know what you mean. It's Friday night and they leave a half an hour early, they close at 6:30, gone.
Do a joke.
Yeah, well, we're not gonna go, hey, you didn't stay to 7 o'clock last night. In our case here, we are concerned to you the $400, we're trying to present you and give you an opportunity to do something with that, what you're doing. So I don't think we maybe need as much restrictions, okay? Because at the end of the day, you started 3 months later, you had an opportunity to create something for yourself. So it behooves them to step up to the plate and go, can I stay later? Really what we would like to hear.
And I think consistency is paramount. It's not necessarily tons of restrictions on when, although I certainly have preferences and opinions about that. But I think consistency in retail is key. If your website says you're going to be open, if your sign in your window says you're going to be open, you need to be open.
Otherwise, people are looking in the window.
Yeah. So
They're not open.
consistency in the
Yeah.
is the
So, go ahead.
Oh, well, Sergey, have you considered the idea of timeshare or co-op so that, if you have one person with the shelves and one person with the storefront, they could have an agreement to cover each other's hours so that it was less burdensome? I mean, that would require a little maybe of coordination on LEDP's part, but it would increase the ease of compliance so that you'd have a presence.
Yeah.
I have a couple of concerns. There's no demising wall here. And so the other thing is that you run a high liability risk if, you guys are not here over the weekend and they've got business transactions on Saturday or Saturday evening. There's commingling of two businesses. I mean, people can get into, these offices potentially. So that's a real issue. And you don't want to be stuck having to police or manage this secondary business. The other thing is that, and then they've got to be willing to agree to an additional insurance for you guys on their policy. And then how disruptive is this going to be for the DDA? You're going to have meetings. You may have an artist in here that may do welding or some other type of art that's going to be noisy. Is that,
I mean, how are you gonna restrict the use?
Well, I think obviously we're gonna vet who we choose, right?
True.
And so depending on what that looks like. But you know, originally we were gonna put a letterpress up there, which definitely makes
Yeah,
noise,
fair.
that type of thing. And we went in and sat and listened to it, and, you know, felt like it was somewhat of a reasonable. Demising the space, I think it's really figuring out, you know, a locking system on our office doors, and then just making sure that, you know, there's really not so much in this part of the space because the bathrooms are in the back, so it'll still have to be utilization of the bathrooms. And then we looked at for the front door having a lock that, having a lock with kind of a buzzer, so if we're here and the retail space isn't open, we could just unlock that door so people just can't walk in. And then we could always also look to see how we can minimize it, so. But some of it, you know, as there are shared spaces in other places, we just kind of figure out where is there a safe for them, certainly a safe for us, that we put any of our valuables in.
And then all this takes time to manage. So, I mean, do we have enough support from a staff perspective to manage the back end of everything? All these things are, you know, we're already stretched. I'm always kind of blown away at what we can accomplish from a staff perspective. And then adding this into it. And so, do we have enough support for this? Do we understand that it's meant to manage?
Well, we're partnering with LEDP, which I think is helpful. Do we understand? No, because we have not done it, right? And so we're trying to make it as simple. It could be you do it once and realize it's just way too hard. You do it once or twice and realize that that's not.
It's not gonna work, so you just let it go, right?
But I do think it was important to have some kind of retail presence in the front. So whether that's, maybe there's not a pop-up business, but there's still a shelf-like aspect, and we have someone that
Those are
helps
great
do it.
ideas because there's so minimal amount of management involved. Putting the artwork up here on display and getting the rent out of that, that's a great idea. I mean, those are easy.
Right.
And your rate's cheap. It really is cheap.
So I don't know. I mean, I think that's the most honest answer. I don't know. People do it a lot, but I guess a lot of it, you know, communities that do it very often are communities that have lots of vacancies, right? And so they're working with people who are doing anything to fill those storefronts. However, I think we have storefronts that come available, and they're so attractive to service businesses or real estate offices or whatever. And I think that's okay. I think it's great that we have great services down here. However, we're hearing from the community that they want retail, they want those kind of things. And as we all know, especially many of you in this room that do it, they're the hardest jobs around, and they're the hardest businesses around. And so, if we can get it to work, I guess the reason why to try it is if we can get it to work, is how do we spark more interest and get people to trust in Longmont, especially those that feel like they need a bolder address or they feel like they need something else. If we can get them to come test our market and see that it's worthwhile, we might be able to make those conversions. But they're all good points, and so it is a risk. I mean, I agree, it is a risk, and maybe it's something that we want to start, maybe not with something so formal, and do we do short-term pop-ups, like literally a weekend, or that type of thing, where people can come in and do that. I do really want to activate that front space, though. I don't want this to be just another office that has Main Street storefront. So whether that's the consignment things that we're able to sell, and then maybe get those consigners to help man it in the evenings and weekends would be good, if that's where we wanted to start. But
Have you talked to the Longmont Art Council that had an open space in their space? Because they had retail up front also. Okay, maybe talk to the executive director, see how that worked for them. Doing also because they were trying to work there pretty much in the back area. They had art also, but I don't think there was an artist actually there all the time. And they had other retail that were trying to do there to see how it went on a day-to-day, because you are, hopefully everyone's working, then we hear the doorbell, so who gets up to see who came in? You know, who's not here to see you, they're here to see the art on the wall. Okay, and then the next thing, which everyone is really addressing here, you stay in the background, and the people, someone comes in, looks at art, and they walk out with a piece of it.
Right.
You know.
Have you considered leasing the front space to the LEDP?
I hear they do.
No, they do. I'll take it for a month.
There's the popcorn right there.
I'll charge you $100 a month.
You gotta pay for 3.
You know, you said consignment, if you wanna get this started for the upcoming holiday season, you could consider approaching somebody who's already a going concern elsewhere, like Fabulous Finds. You know, they might, like the idea of cultivating an east side business, and they could just move some stuff over here really quick. You know, they've already got a fabulous inventory. Get a seamstress to stay.
Sorry, Marsh, I would do that. No,
I don't think it would compete directly with snow at all.
No, not at all. I do have a question, Kimberly. One of the
Make
things
them
is,
use furniture.
if this is successful, it starts off, is there anything to prevent, based on wanting to get started, from if someone approached and said, I want this permanently, to now change that? You set up all in motion that says, we're doing this, and I go, I like it, great relationship, and I want to take it over. Is there any, I mean, just putting it in the back of your
I
mind.
think that would be great, like, I think if something like that happened, or if we did a pop-up or two and just decided, wow, this is really laborious, then, sure, and I think almost
Should take notes
would
of
be
that.
great to have, yeah.
God, disappeared, never happened.
Yes.
I'll add that in other communities, pop-ups typically are in vacant retail space to reactivate that. Obviously, this is a unique situation, and LEDP is cognizant that this is the LVDA space, so we didn't want to dictate what that would look like, and really wanted to go off of Kimberly's and obviously Lloyd's decision on how that would work. If this can be, you know, a place to prototype and test out a program like this that could potentially expand across Longmont.
Joe, given some of the concerns you raised, what do you imagine would be a more appropriate use?
I mean, I think that the other ideas that you have are good. I think making it a functioning retail space is going to be more disruptive than you think, and I think it's going to create more liability. But your advertising, I mean, I have been approached many times by artists who actually would like to have just space to display their artwork, and I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, you can also utilize. You could do, rent out the space there to do conferences, too. That's another option. But I think I would never want to get rid of this front. I don't want you to ever put a demising wall here, because I mean, it creates such an atmosphere in here that's so unique. But you got to fully utilize it to advertise, something.
Right.
And it's cheap. Artists are looking for cheap space to display their stuff. I mean, that makes the most sense to me.
So this is E4all, that's what we focus on, is small micro retail / artisan type businesses, and they're doing a pitch competition October 10th. So we could partner with them and say, look, we have this prime real estate.
Totally.
And then see what comes out of that. But these are businesses that have already been vetted through E4all, and Sergio is already involved in that. So there's going to be several.
And again, there's no other avenue for entrepreneurs in that middle ground to go. It's you get a 1-year lease and good luck. So,
If
and there's higher turnover.
If it's display only, though, it doesn't increase the activity level of downtown.
With activity comes security cameras.
Yeah.
For
Well,
retail.
I get it.
And, yeah, there's just more complexities to that, but.
Remind me again what the rent was for the group that was originally thought might be here.
We're looking at $1,000. When we came in and did our original measurements and that type of thing, the space seemed bigger when we weren't in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you really look at the practical realities, the wheelchair ramp takes up a good amount of that original kind of square footage and that type of thing. And so again, I think that front part at most is 400 square feet, which is it's
So what would we like to do at this point? Have you do some more looking to it, or what kind of direction would you want from us? Do you want to talk to Sergio some more, or, I mean, I know you want to utilize the space, but we gotta decide, especially this is October.
Why don't we try to do it in like incrementally? You try to start off with just advertising, or
See.
just displaying, artwork or retail.
Okay.
And see what the interest level is.
Uh-huh.
So maybe, I'm sorry to jump in, but, I mean, it's a short-term commitment that you're proposing here. Why don't you just give them a try? Why don't you let them try and do what they propose and see what happens? And if it doesn't work, we're just talking about 3 months, and, you stop doing it and you go in one of these other directions. It seems to be shooting down the whole idea, and we think you should at least give it a chance, because the worst that you can do is lose 3 months.
One other thing that I tossed out is this. Let's just say we try all of these things and nothing happens. And we're still responsible for the space. We still have to pay the costs associated with it. Are there changes?
No.
That's where, so,
So the revenue for the space was not budgeted. in
Right.
20.
So there's no impact from not renting the space.
Right.
All right, direction space.
that's the piece. So that's,
Yeah. But if we're gonna do something, we need to make a decision right away, because it's October and we're talking about the prime. If someone's gonna have an interest,
Right.
it's about to happen, so.
And I think if it's gonna work, like Kirsten said, it's gonna work in November and December better than any other time. And so whether that's a combination of, I see what you're saying, but I don't feel like we should have display only. I feel like we should maybe have stuff in here, but if you come in and love it, I feel like you should be able to buy it.
Then is someone going to be here to oversee the merchandise? Whether or not someone walks out with it?
Well,
Whose job is that going to
I
be?
mean, for the most part, Mercedes sits right here, so there is someone that sits out here the whole time.
Put your hand up, Mercedes. Don't act like you're not here. They're talking about you.
security.
So you're trying to get out of retail.
She's the next FBI agent, okay?
Yeah, I think to Jim's point though, I mean, I'm open to saying the 3 month try and see if you can
Just
figure
try
it
and see what
out,
happens, yeah.
experiment.
Yeah.
And then if you all hate it because you're babysitting,
There's too much noise, or.
I mean, I wouldn't make a full year commitment. I wouldn't sign the second 3 month lease
Right.
until you've done it, had the experience of 1 3 month lease.
At that point, too, you also have your interest level, because you would put it out there, and then you would see how the first one went, if someone really was aboard, during the most busiest time supposedly, and then you would know, how it would work.
And this is a partnership with the LADP. And so what does this partnership look like, Sergio?
We work together to make this happen.
Yeah.
And what's the LADP's role and what's the LDDA's role?
I mean, we're gonna be collecting all the data behind the scenes, connecting mentors, getting all the programming, resources together, help find, people that also come to us potentially first, and we can identify them. Creating partnerships with E4All and SBBC to help be a program sponsor, just really make this run smoothly, so.
And Sergio is a great IT guy, so maybe we
Yeah,
can
too.
work with him to figure out, camera systems aren't that much, so how do we get a
$20.
camera system in here and it goes
Yeah.
down the hallway, and again, we are able to monitor, and so everyone would know that if there were issues, we'd be able to really see, the same as we would do with the locking of the front door, so I think kind of having that kind of partnership and figuring out those things would be super helpful. And I know we originally said 3 months, maybe we just 1 month with opportunities to renew each month, so then, and tell those prospects, we're hoping that you'll be here for 3 years, but we're gonna do 1 month at a time, it may not work for you, it may not work for us, and then we're able to reevaluate those kind of expectations. And I think what we'd like to do is start with some folks, we've identified some folks that have done pop-ups in the past, that have had that have been toying with the storefront, that type of thing. So we might reach out to them first, try to handpick those first folks as people that we know or know have had some experience and that sort of thing. So kind of ease that transition a little bit.
If you're doing it for a month, it would charge more.
I agree.
You're gonna have some administrative costs and, all of those sorts of things, and so I think 3 months is reasonable,
Okay.
but if you wanted to do a month, go to 500, or just because you need to kind of help cover that
Yeah.
pain point of signing the lease, all of those sorts of things.
And maybe we would do, yeah, or or if they do sign for 3 months, we'll just have some really easy out clauses at 1 month or 2 months or whatever, depending on if things are not going well for us. There are no easy out clauses.
Okay, so we have some direction then? Okay, everyone's happy? All right, great. We don't want to be here all evening. Thank you very much. We have the LDDA, the GID boundary extension.
So one of the things that we had brought up in executive committee and Dexter had asked to talk about is from time to time we have looked about, is it time or is it appropriate for the LDDA or the General Improvement District to change its current boundaries? And I thought off the heels of the conversation that we just had with the Main Street Corridor Plan, again, not making those decisions today, but seeing if the board is interested in exploring that. I think to do that, it would be a very lengthy process. It would be meeting one-on-one with the property owners. We would have to really, before we even decide, I think, look at what kind of areas would we like to explore, start those conversations, see what kind of momentum we would build. We would need 50% of the property owners to sign that they are interested in opting in to these districts. And we'd have to certainly work with city council. So there'd be a lot of work around that. The one specific recommendation is looking at that general improvement district. The general improvement district right now only goes from 3rd to 6th. And it was used to fund things such as the breezeways, some of that. As we look at wanting to possibly do mid-block crossings, bridge medians, that type of thing, I think expanding the general improvement district would be helpful. We did ask that question to the 200 block property owners when we were doing the charrette and doing that work around there of if they did these things, would they be interested? Almost everyone said yes. A few people said they would need more information. Saying yes to someone's face and signing a ballot is different, but there was certainly folks that were seeing the value and the tangible, what that would get them. So the general improvement district, if you expanded that, the same as the DDA, would be looking at that 600 block, 100 block, and 200 blocks. They go and encompass Kimbark and Kaufman. We have to decide, what does that make sense, or as we do that, what would even be the boundaries of that. And then when we look at the DDA, and I know since I've been here, we had this conversation on and off, and I know Alex is over there, he was certainly here, we've talked about that on and off as well. Looking north is something that we've always looked at, of where that north boundary would be, I'm not sure. Looking south, it's been a little more difficult because there is the urban renewal, who also can have TIF in the south. And so you can only have one TIF depending on what those projects look like. However, if we did expand, I talked to Tony Chacon, who is the redevelopment manager. The DDA could expand down there, and we still would have to negotiate the TIF based on what the project is. But then the DDA would be able to still look at comprehensive management of that, as well as collecting a mill levy if we decided to go south. I believe as a community, we would want to look at what will these projects do for downtown in the southeast urban renewal area, and which TIF could actually generate the most revenue. Our TIF is now, 64% less than it used to be because of state statute. So we would just look at those independently. So those are things I think just to consider when we're looking at it, and I believe we just want to kind of gut check with the board to say, number one, does anyone think it's it's worth starting the conversations, is it north, is it south, is it both? Just some high level thoughts.
That's Joe.
It's worth it.
All right. So yes. John, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ideas of how or where?
Well, just one second. Can you stop, Chris?
Definitely think we need to continue this conversation.
Okay. Your board also? Okay. Alex, you want to say a few words about this? This is the reason why you're here?
No, I'm against it personally.
Well, we're not paying attention to you anyway, so I'm just trying to get parties.
If Marcia said-
No, my hand isn't up. I'm
Oh,
just-
She's still not.
Oh, why are we still in the dark? We're
Yeah.
still, turn back the light.
It's a secret meeting. Yeah.
Did you know that it was worth exploring? I didn't see.
Pardon me?
Did you know that it was worth exploring?
No, I was not having any opinion
You
about
had
it.
no opinion.
We're integrity, right?
So is your question, Kimberly, about from where to where?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, for me, given what's going on in the south end of Main Street, I think north of the river is probably 11th. That's what I imagine.
So that's a 2T, I think, where the Main Street corridor plan had it kind of river to 11.
That's going to be a lot of blocks. But I think the real advantage for the property owners though is it's one way that some of the property taxes that you pay stay in the area where you're doing business or not doing property.
I think we're at an opportune time where there's, I think, some real results downtown, and we can demonstrate that it's
I think you'd want to take it like in small steps and maybe start towards the south end. Since you already have conversations with the people and most of them have expressed interest. And I think the conversations we've had in the past have always been from first to kind of 11th. But now that there's a lot of activity on the southern end, it would make more sense for those people to want to be involved.
Okay, thank you everybody for your comments on that. And we'll continue to work on this and continue to expand. It does take a while to actually get through everything else before we get there. All right, moving forward, we have a financial update.
Delray did pass out the financials, they were part of the packet. So again, I think we are looking on track with what we are doing. The one thing I do want to check on the parking fund is we were going to appropriate some of that money for the parking study, and I'm not sure it's in there. So I'll just check that with you. That's just something that I want to look at. Yeah. I wanted to thank High Plains, who is our title sponsor for the tree lighting. So Colin was working with them, so thank you very much. Excited for a very fun elf-themed tree lighting. If you've ever seen the movie Elf, it's going to be super great. I don't know, but we haven't answered yet.
I can guarantee you that one.
Start of the sponsorship.
Not nearly that fun.
There we go, pop up.
And we did complete the mural project in the alleys back here. So if you haven't seen it, there's 6 new murals, and we painted the crosswalks over, which I think has been great. Everyone can thank Mercedes. She was a rock star in herding all the cats and getting that done and getting everyone figured out. So it was really great. We did get a $3,000 contribution from Art in Public Places as well to offset. We also got a $3,000 grant for that project. Super excited. I think it adds a lot to the
Continuing on, we have the executive director's report.
So our final answer, we are having our open house on November 8th, which is also the kickoff to our holiday season. So we encourage everyone to please keep that date open and please plan on being here about 4 o'clock that day. We'll do our open house, our ribbon cutting, and it'll mesh right into Second Friday where we'll be introducing our Winter Passport program and all of the holiday calling it November 8th, again, because it's such a late Thanksgiving, it takes an entire week out of the shopping season, so we were hearing from our retail businesses that that could be a significant hardship, so we're trying to get people to think about the holidays a week earlier with those open houses. Two other things that I wanted to let you know, Mercedes and I are finalizing the application for the recertification of our creative district. And I did put together a letter of support from the board encouraging the state to recertify us as a creative district. And so I wanted to see if you were okay with having Dexter sign that on behalf of the board. Creative district has been a very vital tool in what we're doing as part of our master plan. Thank you, John.
Oh, yeah.
Look at that.
Read it
My
first.
name.
No, I mean,
Okay. And then one last thing, in my executive report, we had talked about a group of developers that we took that were looking at the Elk site, and we walked them around, and they were interested in that site. However, they started asking about other opportunities or other sites, and looked at our master plan, which did have all of those priority development sites, which were basically all of our service lots. They contacted me back and they were intrigued, and for those of you who have been around here for a while, you'll probably chuckle. In this parking lot back here and looking at things such as a hotel. And what I have to say is when we were moving, I was astounded to see how many hotel iterations there had been in the 70s and in the 80s and everywhere.
No people.
And so I know that they have a lot of work to do and still things to look at, but they asked if it was okay to kind of pursue that a little bit further. So I just wanted to ask all of you if you think that's okay for them to kind of pursue that a little bit further in application.
The parking lot back here. Well, didn't we just talk about a parking study issue?
It would include structured parking, and we would have to replace or add more parking.
I say keep moving it forward.
That's what we're asking for.
We want a hotel, we'll have a hotel.
Well, we'll see. Very, very early on, but I didn't know if it was going to be a.
We'll take the positive approach. They said they're gonna build a hotel. So. Don't say maybe, they're gonna.
People roasting. So, okay, I will
Say yes.
say that we'll talk a little bit further about what that would be. Unless you have any other questions.
We're done. Any questions for our executive director at this present time? Okay, do we have any items from staff? Wow. Any board member comments? Okay.
Actually,
All
I
right.
would ask
Oh.
if,
She left.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
I wanted to ask, since we approved an increase in electric rates last night
Oh,
at city council,
hot off the press information.
yeah, if anybody had any questions about that, small businesses, a few of you, I don't know whether you're small or not, but most of you I think are, got the lowest share of the increase at about 3.76%, if I have it right out of my memory. And low-end rate, domestic ratepayers got the second smallest, after some knockdown, drag-out battling with the staff on my part, actually. But what we're doing is we're putting in the advanced metering infrastructure, allows us to do, which will allow us to do demand management, peak shaving and stuff, which will in turn allow us to get more favorable wholesale rates from PRPA. Our wholesale rate from PRPA went up 2% because we don't do that. So we're costing them money in the summertime because we increase our demand frivolously. So they're punishing us for it essentially, or incentivizing us, if you want to look at that. But the overall increased burden of doing all of that would be 9% if it were, the cost of it were loaded onto the people who have meters only, cost per meter, and so,
Meters.
yeah.
I thought you said mirrors. I'm going, where are you going with this?
No, we're getting new communicating meters,
Okay.
which allows us to have a smart grid
Right.
and, do all of the, on the road to 100% renewable stuff that we have to do. And so it's a very essential capital investment. There is a good explanation of it from between 11 and midnight on the council last night. And I also, if anybody wants to email me, I have the presentation. But we're gonna have, I think, a significant but really well-engineered rate increase for the next 2 years. And after that, we should have the smart rates that will allow people to really, if they are burdened by the rates in any way, they can really take control of their usage at that point. So it should become a moot question after 2022. But for the next 2 years, there's a rate increase. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about it if anybody wants to email me, or if you want to know. Want to ask questions right now, but it sounds like nobody knew enough about it to ask questions right now, so.
It's primarily to fund the equipment.
It's to fund, yeah, they need new software, the software upgrade would have happened anyway. Smart meters won't be any good without that. So there's 3 parts to it. There's new operational software. There is the capital investment, which is mostly smart meters, although with things like electric cars becoming pretty common in Longmont now, we're gonna have to beef up the actual distribution grid in a gradual manner, so part of it's that. And then the part of it is the 2% rate increase, wholesale rate increase that we got from PRPA. And again, the capital investment in particular will allow us to keep that nasty surprise from PRPA from happening again, and even presumably reduce our rates from our wholesale rates going forward.
When you talk about the smart meter technology, does that mean changing out the meters on
It
yourself?
absolutely does, mean changing out the meters.
So that will start in 2020.
That'll start that may start before 2020, but we'll start paying for it in 2020. They're seeking,
Quick if it's starting before 2020.
pardon me?
So you gotta get moving quick if it starts before 2020.
Well, yeah, they're seeking bids now, so.
Does anybody have them, or is this?
No,
Oh, it's every single meter.
yeah, everything is the same old meters that we have, which is a mix right now. People with solar panels have one kind of meter, people with vicious dogs have one kind of meter, and everybody else has a really old fashioned one. So
What do they do with the old meters?
I don't know.
Just wondering
Meters,
if they end up in a landfill or
Public art.
public art, yeah.
The one split.
And oh,
You
it's
know,
Longmont's public utilities.
I never really thought of that. Meters do have an end of life, but I don't know whether it's beneficial. I'll ask that question.
Probably some recyclable.
Maybe they can still be used in another.
Country.
Possibly, although
City.
everybody needs a smart meter soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more board member comments? Well, I thank everybody for coming just a little bit longer to 2 hours. We had a wonderful guest, man. Woo. Okay, we'll adjourn our board meeting. Everyone, we'll see you in 4 weeks or so. Okay? And as we would like to say now, pop up and head on out.
Yeah. Nice. And
Yeah. Don't forget your pop-up cake.
Oh, I love that.
Karen, what did you do the last meeting?
I feel.
Is it an emergency?
Just stick with information.
Yeah.
Sorry, do that.
I know.